Welcome to episode 73 of the Juicebox Podcast. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Insulet, makers of the Omnipod. And the Omnipod, as you may know, is the world's only tubeless insulin pump. Not sure what to call this episode yet. May call it Diabetes Comes Whistling Down the Lane. Is that how that Oklahoma song goes? Oklahoma, where the wind comes. It's right behind the rain, not whistling down the lane. Anyway, this is Tyler. He's in his late 20s. He's 28. Was diagnosed at age 27. Tyler is going to really lay it all out there. He's going to talk to you about how most of the people in his family have type 2 diabetes, and he had resolved himself to thinking that that was going to happen to him. He's going to tell you how his dad's type 2 diagnosis helped him figure out he had type 1. He's going to explain what a maple long john is, and a lot more, actually. Tyler's pretty great, and he came on the podcast and really opened up and talked a lot about the fear that came to him when he was diagnosed, about how the spousal support worked with he and his wife, and just a lot of other great topics. So this is it. Episode 73 of the Juicebox Podcast. What do we call it? I don't know. I'm going to work the word Oklahoma in, I think, though. All right, here we go.
So, my name's Tyler Nida. I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma, or I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I'm from a small town in Oklahoma. So, I'm sorry if you can hear my dog barking. His arch nemesis, the mailman, is coming by.
Don't worry, you'll hear our dog at some point too.
Okay.
And so you're in Tulsa now, but you're from a smaller town in Tulsa originally?
Yes, I live in Tulsa now, but I'm from a town of about 5,000 people called Perry, near Stillwater, Oklahoma, which is where Oklahoma State University is.
I see. And how old are you?
I'm 29. I was diagnosed in September when I was 28. My birthday was in February.
Oh gosh, it's very recent for you then.
Yes, 7 months, going on 7 or 8 months now.
Do you have a history in the family of not just type 1, but any endocrine issues?
Type 2, my dad's side of the family, pretty much everybody has type 2.
You get it's like a part of your card when you're
pretty much, yeah. And my first cousin has type 1 diabetes now, or she's had it for about 20 years now.
Okay. And was she diagnosed as a younger person?
Yes, when she was 11 or 12, she was diagnosed.
Okay. Well, I'd say that runs in the family then.
I would think so. And I kind of had the idea that I was going to get type 2. Once my dad was just diagnosed with type 2 in July of last year.
Yeah.
And so, I kind of figured I would get type 2 and just, diet and exercise and, that kind of thing.
And you didn't think you were going to get type 2 because of anything specific other than it appears to be a birthright in your family to get...
Exactly. No, that's exactly right.
Right.
And I was kind of prepared for it. And what actually brought on the diagnosis and probably saved my life was my dad had been diagnosed. I recognized the symptoms of diabetes, and I had a doctor's appointment scheduled just for a physical, just for a wellness checkup, because I get one free a year. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to check my blood sugar and my fasting blood sugar and say, I'm just going to check it. I'll have a log whenever I go to the doctor, and we'll go from there.
So I want to make sure I understand. So you're seeing some of the telltale signs that your dad's living with type 2, and you start recognizing some of them in yourself?
Yes.
Like which ones?
Well, I'd actually been, let's see, it started 2 years ago. I dropped about 30 pounds, and I'd lost 30 pounds in about 3 to 4 months.
Not doing anything different.
No, not doing anything different. But it happened at a time. I work manual labor. I'm a maintenance technician, and so it happened. It started in the summer, and so I always lose weight in the summer because I work outside.
Yeah.
And so, I just put it towards that. I just put it to that. And then it just, everything started to compound. I was thirsty, but it was summertime. And so I was drinking a lot of water because it was 110 degrees here in Oklahoma. And so, it all kind of played in with my normal routine, but it was just a little bit worse.
Amped up a little bit more than what you were expecting.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, if it gets to be 110 degrees anywhere, you should move.
Right.
I think that's too hot.
I grew up with it, and we all just, in Oklahoma, you just kind of get used to it. And it just turns into not that big a deal. You just learn to work around the heat of the day.
That's amazing. I was in Atlanta in July with my son last year. He was playing baseball.
Oh.
And at one point, I had nothing. I had no self-respect left. I was hiding in the shadow of a telephone pole watching him play baseball. And I'm not...
Yes.
Yeah.
Any shade is prime real estate in the summer. And especially in Atlanta, I mean, the humidity in Atlanta is probably outrageous.
Talking about compounding things, it was insanely hot, and the humidity was terrible. It was just, I don't know. I look at that and I think, why is anyone here? Like, this should be an uninhabited portion of the country.
I was in the Coast Guard and stationed in New Orleans, and the humidity would be 90%, and the temperature would be 95 degrees, and it was miserable. Just the temperature and the humidity compounded is just horrible.
Well, so to your point, then, to being out in that kind of heat and to be exerting yourself, losing weight doesn't sound crazy. Being thirsty doesn't sound crazy.
Right. It wasn't a problem. And then winter came on, and I always gain weight in the winter because I eat more to bulk up for the cold weather, because it gets pretty cold here.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't gaining the weight. I was still eating more, but I wasn't gaining the weight. All the typical signs of type 1.
Right.
But I didn't feel bad. That was the thing. I didn't feel bad. All these things were happening, but I didn't feel bad. And I don't know what the deal was. I just didn't feel bad.
Well, once you got a meter in your hand and you tested, what was your fasting blood sugar?
My fasting blood sugar, 3 days before, 3 days before I went in the hospital, my fasting blood sugar was 336. And
you didn't feel sluggish or cloudy or anything?
Well, at that time I did.
By then you did.
Yeah. This was probably a year and a half after all the symptoms had started. And I actually didn't realize that my dad didn't get diagnosed until the July before I got diagnosed. So he's only had type 2 or he's only known he's had type 2 for, almost 10 months now.
Yeah, not even a year.
So, this is kind of a new family thing for he and I both.
Right.
But it was the little things that started to add up, throughout the time. I had heartburn really bad, which was odd. And I haven't heard that symptom of type 1, but heartburn. I was lactose intolerant.
Out of nowhere, like that didn't exist for you before?
No, it really didn't. And so I was becoming more and more lactose intolerant. I started to have pain in my eyes. It felt like my eyes were going to pop.
Yeah, the pressure.
It was weird, and they were very light sensitive. And then this was starting to compound closer to when I got put in the hospital.
So when you walk into that well visit, do you lead with, "I'm here to tell you I have type 1 diabetes"?
I actually never made it to that visit.
Oh, okay.
I checked my blood sugar again, and it was 340 something. And my mom is an LPN, and so I just happened to call her that morning, and just to talk and visit. And I told her what it was, and she said, "You need to go to urgent care."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Well, I still have to work. I still have a full day of work ahead of me." And
did your mom talk some sense into you?
Well, she said, you need to go. And, being a stubborn son, I kind of blew her off. And throughout the day, she texted me and kept telling me that I need to go. And she finally said, "Okay, after work, you have to make an appointment and go to the urgent care." Right. And so I did. I made it to the urgent care. And They checked my blood sugar at the urgent care. It was 360. And that was after a full day of work and, lunch and just my normal routine. And I felt pretty bad that day, but I just felt tired, but I thought it was because I worked a 9-hour day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the the physician's assistant walked in and said, okay, here, you need to take this. And the urgent care I went to is part of a hospital. And he said, you need to take this and go over to the ER. And I still was just puzzled. I thought, this is just type 2. What's the big deal? And got to the ER, and they actually admitted me within 45 minutes of being at the ER.
Yeah.
I guess my signs were bad enough, my ketones were high enough, and everything, my blood test, were bad enough that they actually admitted me in front of people who were bleeding.
They just rushed you ahead of people. And
yeah.
Well, Tyler, it's interesting, isn't it? You were so prepared to have type 2 diabetes that when you thought you had it, you weren't even rattled by it. It didn't seem. You're just, like, okay, here it comes. Just like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then they get me into the ER. I hang out for a little while. My wife comes up to the hospital to sit with me. And this is going on 6 or 7 o'clock at night now.
Okay.
They admit me. I get a room. I eat a sandwich because the cafeteria wasn't open. So and I hadn't eaten, and I said, can I have a sandwich or something? So I eat a sandwich, no insulin. They haven't given me any insulin yet or anything like that. And a team of 4 doctors walked into my room and said, sit down in this wheelchair. We're taking you to ICU.
Did you bring your sandwich?
Yeah, no, I'd already eaten it.
Oh, okay.
So I couldn't wait until now that I look back at it, I wonder if, they checked my blood sugar when I got to ICU, and it was probably out of the park after eating white bread and a bag of chips.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, Jesus, that's crazy. So they get you up to ICU, and then it's kind of just how I remember my daughter being in. Probably you get IV. You get fluid through IVs and insulin that way, and they bring your blood sugar down slowly. How long were you in the hospital?
I was in the ICU for 28 hours, something like that, and they had me on an insulin drip, an IV fluid, and at the same time I was on an insulin drip, I was also on IV or saline fluid with glucose added to it, just to keep me from just dropping.
Everything balanced. Yeah, it seems very, and I don't obviously know the medical reasoning behind it, but it seems very important for them to titrate you down from a very high blood sugar. They don't want you to come down too quickly, that's for certain.
And so in the ICU, they check my blood sugar every 30 minutes.
Okay.
Which was horrible. Now that I do it so often now, I look at it and I'm like, man, every 30 minutes for 28 to 30 hours, that was terrible. I ran out of fingers for them to stick. But then I was in the hospital total for 4 days. And in that 4 days, I took 22 bags of IV fluid. I was so dehydrated. And the doctors told me, they said, we don't know how you were still up and moving around because you were so dehydrated. And I can look at pictures of myself within that year to year and a half time span, and I can see the weight falling off, and I can see the transition into type 1 diabetes.
When you look back on that moment when you were there being diagnosed, do you have photos of yourself right at that time?
I have a photo of myself in the hospital.
Do you look back at it now? Do you look like you were dying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. My cheeks were sunken in. My eyes were sunken in. I looked physically tired. I mean, it was a change. It was wild.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing that I want people to understand is that when changes like this happen to you, so over time and incrementally, like even when you look back later and you think, how did I not see this about myself?
Right.
Like I look at Arden and she just looked like a zombie.
Yeah, and that's exactly it.
Yeah. And I was just like, no, she's been sick. And now I look and I was like, geez, anyone could look at this child and think, take it to the hospital, but
absolutely.
It just, when it happens slowly like that, it is very hard to detect.
And it's hard to see from it was hard for myself to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, listen, it's the same reason when you lose a little weight and you look at somebody you live with and you're like, right? Huh? And they're like, I don't know what you're
Right.
talking about.
That's
Because
exactly how.
right,
That's
'cause
exactly what happened.
they're accustomed to seeing you all the time. So
And people at work asked me. They said, "Are you trying to lose weight?" I said, "I'm not trying, but I don't mind it. You know, I felt great. I looked good. You know, I had my 6-pack back."
yeah, that really is and no kidding too. Your vanity is really a part of it where you're like, you just think you're being paid back by karma all of a sudden.
Right,
Like karma's
that's
finally
right.
like, oh, this guy wasn't supposed to be chubby, and and they give it because that's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for
right.
I'm waiting for the universe to figure out I'm a thin guy, and so
You know, and it was really crazy because I got out of the military, and I was healthy. I was completely healthy. You know, and you have to be healthy to join the military.
yeah, right.
And I was healthy throughout the military. I got out of the military, and my wife and I moved to Tulsa. I was still healthy. We've been in Tulsa for about 6 years now, and I've been healthy, and then this change just all of a sudden just started. And it was you're exactly right. You know, I lost the weight, but I still felt okay. And you know, one day I got out of the shower and looked at myself in the mirror and said, "Man, I look good."
Yeah, I'm doing it right now, everyone.
That's right. That's exactly what it was. And you know, I'm an outdoorsman. I love the outdoors. I hunt and fish avidly, and just you know, I love to hike and camp. And I really started to notice a difference in my performance in the outdoors, my walking ability, being able to walk long distances without being tired. Because there are some days hunting where I would walk 5 to 6 miles,
Yeah,
and be fine
Didn't
and be
bother
just fine.
yeah,
And then there was one morning in particular before I got diagnosed that I went hunting, and you always get up really early and go out, and I was hunting for deer. And I got up, had breakfast, got in my deer stand, and I wear a harness in my deer stand. Well, I fell asleep in my deer stand because and I look at it now, and it's because my blood sugar was so high.
yeah. It is hard to. I mean, high blood sugars are they're difficult on you.
And
yeah,
and I had eaten maple long john, of course, and I was sitting in my deer stand, and I fell asleep for an hour.
you're gonna have to forgive me here. Maple Long John.
Yeah, I had a maple long john. Do you know what a maple long john is?
I have no idea what that is. That's why I'm asking. Good.
So it's a donut. It's a long donut. It's a bar, a maple bar.
Mm-hmm.
Some people may call them maple bars, but it has maple flavored frosting on it, like maple syrup flavored frosting.
Okay.
And it's take a round donut and elongate it into a bar shape.
Right. Pour sugar over top of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Put sugar on top of that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I look at the carb count now that I know how to count carbs, and it was probably 100.
Right. Now, would you? So okay. Jesus. All right. So this is kind of takes you out of the blue, but almost doesn't, because you were kind of waiting for type 2 diabetes, but you get type 1 instead. They get you when you leave the hospital. Was there any talk of like diabetes technology? Are you using anything now? Or I mean, are you
I'm not using any technology right now other than just a finger stick, just a meter.
A meter.
I'm on MDI.
Right.
I'm using a Pedra Atlantis as my 24-hour. And right now with my job, the way it is, I have done a lot of research. I am a gadget guru. I love gadgets. And so I've done a lot of research on pumps and Dexcom and the Medtronic CGM. And right now, it's just not for me. I've thought about it.
Right.
And with my job, the way it is, I just feel like, because I'm always lifting and moving things and carrying heavy loads, and I can just see myself ripping a pump off or ripping a side off pretty easily. And I have control with injections right now.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
so
if it's working for you, it's working for you. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's how I feel. I'm a creature of habit. And I, being in the military, I get that regiment, to do the same thing every day.
So then my question is, and you don't have to answer. You could say, I'm not going to tell you that, Scott. But I'm wondering when people say it's working for me, what does that mean? And does that how are your A1Cs, or or what are your
Right.
what do your spikes and lows look like? Like, you know what I
So
mean?
my last A1C, which was done a month ago, or a little bit less, a couple weeks ago, was a 5.
No. And are you having any crazy lows, or?
I'm not having, and by crazy, the lowest I have ever been since I've been diagnosed, again, which is still only 7 or 8 months.
Right.
The lowest I've ever been was 49. And I
Okay.
felt terrible. I could feel it. It was
I
bad.
kick sure, but yeah.
But I wasn't about to pass out or anything. It was just, I knew it was bad, treated it. But that was actually 2 to 3 weeks after being diagnosed.
Are you honeymooning by any chance, or are you using about as much insulin as they expect?
I guess I'm honeymooning. It's hard to say. Everything that I've read says that a honeymoon can last anywhere from a couple months to up to a couple years.
Yeah, it really does all depend, I guess.
I guess it's up to my body. Right now, I'm not having many highs. I guess the last time I had a high was I miscalculated some carbs, and I was at like 230. So I gave a correction dose, and it brought me back down, and I was fine.
So you're shooting insulin for meals, for instance, and then how far after that insulin do you look to see what your blood sugar is?
2 hours. I do 2 to 2.5 hours.
Yeah. I think it's a good gap.
And I really, I've changed my diet quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I was a meat and potatoes kind of guy. I grew up on a farm, and
yeah,
and so I've actually almost cut potatoes completely out of my diet.
They're tough to mash.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
I figured out how to bolus for French fries though from Chick-fil-A.
Well, that's important.
And so that was a big deal for me. I love the waffle fries from Chick-fil-A. So that's my one thing. I do that. So just, learn, for me, it was a whirlwind. I knew I was probably going to get some form or type 2 diabetes just from family history.
Yeah, no, you had that feeling, right?
Yeah, but the type 1 diagnosis, it was hard. It was hard to take just because of the, well, you probably felt it too with your daughter. It was just the chronic, lifelong. It just felt like it was a death sentence what it felt like.
It's so interesting that type 2 didn't feel like that to you. I think that's indicative of how people who don't have type 2 diabetes can easily marginalize what it is. Like,
absolutely.
And it's just like, oh, I'm going to get that. That's the point in my life when I'll stop drinking soda and I'll have to take that pill.
Yep.
And obviously that's not, now that your father has it, now you see that's not what it is.
Exactly.
And it's a little closer to you so you can see it better. But at the same time, people from the outside are always going to feel like that poor disease, type 2 diabetes has just been, over time and without, people properly understanding it. It's thought of as the common cold. Like,
that's exactly what it is. Yeah. I was about to say that socially it's acceptable. I mean, it's, overweight people get type 2 diabetes. That's what everybody says. That's what everybody thinks.
Very oversimplified. Yeah. No, yeah. I know.
And so, and now that I have type 1 and have learned how to count carbs and learned about the glycemic index, I mean, it's just a crazy amount of information that I've absorbed just from this diagnosis. Now I'm, trying to help my dad with his stuff. And
how is that going? Is he receptive to it?
He is. He's very receptive to it, and he is a very active guy. He owns his own business, doing a form of construction, and so he is very active. He's always been active my whole life. We've always been outside, played sports and stuff. And so it's actually, he's doing very well with it. And it's mainly because of his activity and his eating habits that he's able to, have control.
What's he doing for medication? Do they have him on metformin or?
He was on metformin. Now he's using, He was on Combiglize also, and now I think he's on Januvia.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of new drugs coming out right now.
Yeah. And so, and I really haven't done a whole lot of research on any of those. But I guess my biggest thing is information for me is the biggest key in learning everything I can about, carb counting and learning about, just like your interview with the doctor that wrote Sugar Surfing.
Dr. Ponder, yeah.
Dr. Ponder, I mean, just learning everything I can about type 1 diabetes and how to help myself manage it will make it easier.
Well,
it won't,
Yeah, you have to have the information because you're being asked to do things that without enough information you're at best doing halfway, you
Right.
know, and at that point you're putting all that effort into it anyway, not to get the result you're looking for seems, it just takes the life right out of you. You might as well
Yeah.
get all the information and get the result you're looking for, and at least your effort gets rewarded then.
Right.
Let me ask you. I was going to ask you
ahead.
when you listen to Dr. Ponder talk about bumping like the CGM line around and things like that, and you say you're a tech person, it makes you want a glucose monitor, but you're having trouble trying to imagine it in your life.
Actually, I went through the process, got approved by my insurance, got approved by Dexcom, and had everything set up. And I just, one, the cost. And my insurance is going to pay up to 80% of the cost of the Dexcom.
But you still have to pay the other 20.
I have to pay the other 20. Yeah. And my wife and I are very budget oriented. And at right now, with the control that I have, and I probably am still honeymooning,
mm-hmm.
and with the control that I have right now, I just really can't see a need for it. And with my A1C like it is, I think I'm doing okay. And my wife and I have talked quite a bit. And if we ever see the need for it, then, we both decided, hey, it'll be great. We'll get the Dexcom and we'll go from there. But I like to learn about those things. And if I can learn about it and learn how to use it before I even get it, then I may be able to help someone else who has a Dexcom just from something that I read. Say, hey,
you'll also be able to adapt some of the ideas without the technology. Like, for instance, I have no idea about this, but I'm going to ask you, when you're having a meal, do you shoot your insulin prior? Do you dose yourself prior to the meal, or do you do it right when you start eating?
No, I dose it. It depends on what my blood sugar is.
Sure.
I always check at least 15 minutes before the meal, 10 to 15 minutes before the meal. And if I'm over 130, then I will bolus then for the meal.
Yeah.
10 to 15 minutes before the meal.
Yeah. See, and that is something I would assume you've picked up from looking for information. I don't.
Absolutely.
Your doctor didn't tell you to do that, I would imagine.
No.
Yeah.
No, because when I left the hospital, and I'm sure you got this too, and I'm sure a lot of people get it, and I hope more people get better education before they leave the hospital. And I actually got great education before I left. But it was, you are a 1 to 15 carb ratio. You only need to inject insulin right when you have the meal in front of you. And you should always eat 75 grams of carbs, 70 grams of carbs for every meal.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like fun.
That's what I got. That's what I got when I left the hospital.
There goes that donut.
Right. And I knew, and I will say that the type 1 diagnosis was really hard for me.
Sure.
Because I still have a great life, but I'd had a lot of fun, and I've always been a tough guy, and always had taken pride in being a tough guy, and being, that was being in the military, Boy Scouts. I'm an Eagle Scout. And so, it's always been a manly man. And that's how I grew up too on a farm, was manly man, that kind of thing.
You push through things. You don't succumb to small pains and things like that.
And that's probably why my symptoms went as far as they did.
Yeah.
And I will say that's probably a lot of that.
Tyler, I didn't. I'm not from a military family, but I grew up in a blue collar household, and on the East Coast around Philadelphia. And I think sometimes if it wasn't for growing up like that, trying to parent someone with diabetes would have killed me by now. But there's just moments when I refuse to give up, but you do look back sometimes and you see that refusal to take care of yourself, it takes a toll on you at some point.
Absolutely,
too. Yeah,
absolutely. And so that just, that stuff just, it has helped. Having that background has helped with the diagnosis, but it was hard for me.
After the break, Tyler will talk about his difficulties that he came across and how he got over them, and a bunch of other stuff. But first, hey, what's that music? Listen, that's the ad music, baby. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story for an ad. So last weekend, Arden and her teammates won the New Jersey Little League State Championship. That's not the story. The story is that the championship game was not close to our house, about an hour and a half ride. So Arden and her teammates all got into their coach's cars, and they headed up the turnpike. I was not with her. Arden's blood sugar when she left was not optimal because of an earlier lunchtime meal that didn't go well, insulin-wise. So I'm now texting Arden, hey, bolus this much. When they get to the field, they want to have a snack before the game. The girls have a snack. I'm able to give her more insulin. Now, she's gotten insulin 3 or 4 times now. No needles, nothing like that because of the Omnipod. Easy to make small adjustments to her blood sugar. So now here we are, about an hour before the game's going to start, and Arden's blood sugar is right where I want it. This is where the Omnipod becomes indispensable. If you were using an insulin pump that isn't the Omnipod, you would be disconnecting to play softball or to play any of your sports because you're not going to run around with your insulin pump all hanging off of you with the tubing going everywhere. But that's not a problem with Omnipod. So for the next 3 hours, Arden played in a softball game, celebrated afterwards with a cupcake, and did all those things with her blood sugar between 80 and 110 because she was able to get insulin while she was being active. Arden required a bolus and a temp basal during that game to keep her blood sugar like that. It was so easy with the Omnipod. Just go to myomnipod.com/demo and try out the free non-functioning demo pod. You will not be sorry that you did it. There's links in the show notes too. myomnipod.com/demo. Come on, go now, do it. Well, after the podcast. Yeah, I want to ask you a little bit about that though. When you say it was really difficult for you, is there an example or two that you have of how it struck you and why it was so difficult?
I guess it was, for me it's lifelong. That was the hardest thing for me to accept, was this is forever.
But you didn't think about type 2 that way?
I did, but since society has basically taken the edge off of type 2, I guess I should say.
Yeah, that felt like you just had to take a vitamin or something like that.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah, it wasn't going to be that bad.
You take a pill,
right.
And you'll be fine.
Yeah, I get that.
And I was uneducated. I will say that I was uneducated about both types of diabetes. I had only had a little bit of exposure to type 1 diabetes through my cousin and through a good friend of mine. He has type 1 also. But I've had very little exposure to type 1 and what it's all about.
So the fear of, I guess, like a low blood sugar or becoming unconscious, like that stuff's not in your head about type 2, but now with type 1 it is. And plus you add, and I don't know, I'm supposing here for you, but I know for me, like once you add the injection aspect to it, it goes from feeling like something you take care of at home to something that should be being taken care of in a hospital, but since you can't live your whole life in a hospital, you have to bring the hospital home with you.
That's right.
Right.
And when I left the hospital, I was scared.
Yeah.
I will say it. I will say I was scared. We went to Walgreens pharmacy. We picked up my insulin, and not thinking about it, we didn't get needles. We didn't get pen. I'm on pens. I don't have syringes. But we didn't get the pen needles, so we can't, because in my mind,
pens, but you didn't have the caps for them.
Right. Yeah. In my mind, it should come with them.
Right.
That should be in the same box as the pens. You should get needles along with it. Didn't even think about it. Get home. It's 6:00 at night, and I get home, open the box, ready to eat dinner. and don't have any needles. Okay, so it's back to Walgreens. And it's just, I mean, I was scared, didn't know, but with support from, I have to give it to my wife. She supported me so much, and it was amazing what she did for me. Sleeping in the hospital, while I'm in ICU, she's sleeping on a little chair right next to my bed, and that kind of thing. And then when I get home, it's okay, grab this, and along with me learning everything about it, she's having to learn it all too.
Yeah. Plus, I think it's funny, we don't talk about it as much, but for the other person, whether it's a parent or a spouse or something like that, yeah, maybe it sounds a little harsh, but when you get married, you say till death do us part, you say for richer or for poorer, but you don't really think you're going to end up living in a cardboard box when you say that.
That's
you
right.
don't really think that the guy next to you is going to suddenly need insulin all the time, to stay alive.
Exactly right. That's exactly right.
It's a test of, it really is a test of your connection at that point, and I'm assuming that that's some of the fear for you, that maybe you looked over at her at one point and you thought, maybe she's going to take off. Well, or maybe, what I remember saying to my wife, like, do you think this will break up our marriage? When our daughter got diabetes, like, do you think this will add enough stress and terror to our lives that it'll have a blowback effect on our relationship? Like, it could be,
The one thing I can say is our marriage has been tested and tried, just from, me being in the Coast Guard.
Yeah, the military service, I would imagine.
She, when we got married, I had about 2 years left in the military when we got married, 1.5 to 2 years. We got married. I had 20 days of leave. I came home. We got married. We loaded up all her stuff. She moved down to New Orleans with me. And then we were together in New Orleans for about 3 or 4 days. And then I had to leave to go to a week-long training.
And then she's there by herself.
By herself.
Yeah.
Never been to New Orleans. Never been,
Yeah, your wife's a tough guy too then. Yeah. So she can already put up, she knows how to put up then.
That's right. Yeah. And so then throughout that year that we were married, I was deployed and in training for a good 150 days. In just that year, the first year that we were married.
Mm-hmm.
So we had been tested.
Yeah.
And I will say that probably helped us a lot because,
Yeah,
but,
yeah, absolutely. Listen, every thing you go through builds you for the next one. That's for certain.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly right. So we got home from the hospital, and there was some sitting in the bed and hugging and crying.
Oh, please. Are you kidding me? I'm waiting for the next time I cry, and it's been a decade for me.
Yeah.
Because it hits you out of nowhere sometimes.
Yeah.
So okay, so you sound like you're doing great. You're probably still honeymooning. You're not sure. You've looked into the technology. You don't think it's right for your lifestyle. You're not ruling it out, but at the same time, it's not a right now thing for you. The fear, has it begun to dissipate as you learn more?
Yeah. And I don't, I guess, I hear a lot of people talk about being scared of lows. And listening to your podcast about when you did the episode on Bold with Insulin, that to me, when I first left the hospital, I was scared. Don't want to go too low. Don't want to go too low. And I know being low is not good. It is not a good thing at all.
Yeah.
And it is dangerous. But like I've read, and it's easier to catch a low than it is to bring down a high.
Yeah. The highs are tough. You really battle with them. The hours and hours of your life are gone. And
and so for me, and I test probably 7 times a day.
Nah,
7 to 8 times a day.
I would say when Arden was MDI, we were 9, but she was really little too. So that seems right.
And so I test before I drive to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
I test before I do any strenuous activity at work. I take a test in. And for me, if I'm below 80, I have a snack. I just have a small 4 gram snack, and
Just something, yeah,
almonds are my go-to thing.
Yeah.
Almonds and peanuts are my go-to thing.
just to kind of bump you up a little bit if you know you're about to go for a drive, if you know you're about
Exactly.
to really pour it on at work and things like that. How about the guys you work with? That I'm interested in that. How are they? Because I've worked with guys before in situations where I'm assuming is pretty similar to the one yours is in, and I'm interested if they're. I mean, did you tell them about it? I mean, are they on the lookout for you, or is it?
Yeah, I actually went. We have a meeting every Friday morning at work. I work at a plant nursery, a retail plant nursery, and so I got with everybody who's normally around me on that Friday morning meeting, and I said, look, just to let you all know, I've been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I'm on insulin. If I start talking funny, like I'm drunk, if I'm not making sense, or you see me stumbling around, something like that, if I'm just doing something that is abnormal for me, I need you all to come to me and sit me down and help me test my blood sugar and get me some sugar. And I just went through everything with them, and to me, I'm not embarrassed about it. It's not a big deal to me.
Right.
The more that people know that I have it, that are around me, the safer I'm going to be. And you know what? Maybe they will recognize symptoms in someone else for low blood sugar or even for type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, that would definitely be my hope, is that you create, advocacy and understanding in a wider way. Plus, you keeping yourself safe.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think it's great.
And so, that was one thing that I tried to do at work was, and I'm not scared to talk about it at all. And I told them, if you have questions about it, ask me. Feel free to ask me. I don't care. And if I don't know, I'll find out.
Yeah.
That's been a big deal to me at work and at home and with any of my friends and family. If they have questions, I said, I don't care. Just ask me. It's not a big deal.
Good for you. Yeah, I think a lot of people, I understand when people don't want other people to know, but almost like with the technology, I'm not, you're an adult, you don't need me telling you about what you should be looking into and not looking into. But I think that sort of like with the technology, being open with it, if it seems like you don't want to be open in the beginning, once you do it, it's not the thing you were scared of once you do it. And so it's very worthwhile, even for just your own personal safety. You don't need to be running around trying to create advocacy. That's not your job if you don't want it to be.
Right.
But just for yourself, so that people around you can say, hey, Tyler I've never seen him do that before. Like, maybe we should just go check on him real quickly.
That's exactly
without
right.
them feeling uncomfortable, because it could be that somebody would see you doing that and just, out of discomfort, just not approach you, and then you could end up being in a problem situation.
Yeah.
So,
and I keep a bottle of glucose tablets in my truck. I keep one in my desk, and I told everybody, I said, look, a soda works, juice works. I said, some sugar. Yeah, that's what I need, and that's that was a big deal to me, and especially to stay safe at work, because I do operate machinery, not all the time, but it is part of my job. I operate machinery, pretty heavy machinery, and I use power tools and.
Yeah, no one wants to look up and see Tyler slumped over a front end loader coming up.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, and a forklift going crazy.
Yeah, right.
And so I just tried to tell everybody at work what's going on, and then with the technology, I love technology. I built robots in high school. I just think it's awesome, and the advances in technology that we're doing is amazing. 3D printing and just everything that we're doing right now, and with the diabetes technology, I think it's amazing.
I'm about to interview somebody who programmed their own artificial pancreas
software. Oh, that's really cool.
Took their glucose monitor and their pump, and then they they wrote the code for the artificial pancreas for themselves.
I mean, I listened to the podcast about Bigfoot Biomedical.
Yeah.
And that was really cool. The minute that podcast ended for me, I went and jumped on the internet and started looking up them, because I think that's awesome. I think what they're doing is really cool.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, they just put out I saw them publish a picture recently, and you know all those guys' kids are using the setups and stuff like that. People in their family, and all their blood sugars are like between 90 and 110, and
awesome.
Makes this statement about like this is where it expects your blood sugar to be in the future and stuff like that. It's very exciting. I mean, I'm not, I'm genuinely not trying to talk you into anything, but I guarantee you, when you want to do it, if that time comes, you'll make it work. I wouldn't be worried about the kind of work you do.
Right.
There are other people doing the same things. There's people playing fairly strenuous sports. They're getting knocked around and everything, and you'd make it work.
Yeah, and hearing you talk about Arden wearing the Omnipod while she plays softball, and generally being a kid, I can remember when I was younger, just playing rough and doing all that stuff, and playing baseball and stuff like that, and just hearing about her wearing the Omnipod and doing that sort of thing, that to me says a lot about the Omnipod and the technology.
How it works. For me, it's when I was talking to Victor Garber, and he brought up how people kept telling him you should get an insulin pump. You'll be able to do more with it. Manipulate your basal rates. Bolus a couple times without shooting insulin if you need to for meals. And he said he was very resistant. He said same thing. He had diabetes for a very long time, and it was a creature of habit and didn't want to do it. And then he said, I feel like his almost word for word is what he said. And then just like everything else in life, after I got an insulin pump, I thought, what was I worried about?
Yeah.
And there's a lot about life like that where you could talk yourself out of anything if you try hard enough.
Absolutely. And you can justify just about anything.
Absolutely. Yeah. By the way, I cannot stop thinking, because I worked in a sheet metal shop when I was a teenager and in my early 20s. I cannot stop thinking about how the a forklift, because they steer in the back with that tight radius. I have this amusing image in my head of you just a little low, just spinning in circles on a forklift.
You don't have to be low to spin in circles. It's fun.
It's just fun.
It's fun whether you're low or not. And I train people how to drive the forklift. That's one of my jobs at work is to teach people how to drive the forklifts.
That's amazing.
And it's a fun machine to drive.
I've had a lot of fun in my past doing it, honestly, to be perfectly honest. Although you're moving around plants, which is a bit of my personal hobby. I was moving sheet metal around, which was not quite as exciting. But that's amazing. Tyler, you just, man, I don't know, like 7 months, right? It's just not that long. Can I ask you this? How long are you married in total?
We've been married for 7 years now. And
you're just about in your late part of your 20s. So have you been talking about having kids?
We have. We've talked about it since we first got married.
And is this changing anything about that conversation?
It changed a little bit. And we just had that talk about a month ago. And because I brought up in my mind, and I know they say type 1 is not genetic, but there's more and more that I'm reading that shows that, maybe not my kids, but my grandkids.
Yeah, I would stop you, Tyler. I'm not a doctor, as you'll hear me say over and over again, but I think that if you look a little harder, type 1 diabetes is definitely genetic. It definitely is passed through in that way. You'll see it run. I mean, not always, right? Like sometimes it'll just pop up out of nowhere, but that doesn't mean it's not in your bloodline somewhere. It just means you can't identify it in your bloodline somewhere.
Right. And what my train of thought was, do I really want to pass this disease on? Do I want to continue this, this disease through natural childbirth? We know we want to have children. And we know we want to be parents, but the biggest thing for me was, do I want to keep this going? Should we adopt? And so we've talked about adoption and stuff like that. But
I have to tell you, I think that some people would think that you shouldn't worry about that, and I would think some people would think you're completely justified. I see both sides of the argument, and I think I think that's a completely justifiable statement. I've said it here before. I'm pretty sure if Arden doesn't get type 1 diabetes, my wife and I might have been thinking about a third baby. But, and it wasn't so, I don't want to say it wasn't so much. I think in my mind, I don't want to speak for my wife, I guess is what I should say. But in my mind, I kind of thought the same thing, like, gosh, I don't want to do this to another person, and even though it's, but if the mixture of my wife and I, could make a baby that has type 1 diabetes. But at the same time, now here's the other side of the argument. I look at my daughter, 12 years old, living a perfectly normal life with type 1 diabetes. And I think at the same time that concern was ridiculous. I could have 50 babies that have type 1 diabetes. What would be the problem? And then I talked to, from the Oakland A's, I talked to Sam Fold a couple weeks ago. And he's just had another baby. And he never once thought about it. And it's interesting because I wonder how your thinking will change over time once you've had type 1 longer.
Right.
That's the thing and I don't know the answer to that question. And you don't either, but I wonder if we ask you that question again in a couple of years, if you don't answer it differently.
My wife is of the thought, well, let's cross that bridge when we get there. She says, what if they don't? What if our kids don't get type 1
That's
diabetes?
Simple. Yeah.
And I said, and that is very valid, and we will continue talking about it. And I am not against having children, natural children.
But right now you're just examining all the aspects of the idea.
Exactly.
Well, listen, you can trick her into anything. You got her to move to New Orleans and then live by herself. So
that's right. So
I can't get my wife to go across the street, by the way. That's the difference between before you're married and after you're married.
And that was probably, we were still in the honeymoon period when she moved down to New Orleans.
She's like, it'll be great, till like the third day she was by herself and you were gone.
That's exactly right. It'll be great. Okay, I'm going to see you in a month.
Yeah.
And that happened a couple times.
No, I guess with the military that is what happened. So yeah.
But I will say, a big thing that has helped me a lot was a local group that I joined at the type 1 support group. And just being around other people that have type 1 and hearing their experiences and hearing, okay, this is how you bolus for pizza.
It's incredibly helpful.
And for me, it's getting back to a normal lifestyle. And I have a great life, and I'm living a great life. I still get to hunt. I still get to fish. I still get to be outdoors, which I love to do.
Right.
I just have to add another thing to it. And the more I'm doing it, the repetition, practice makes perfect, that sort of thing, the more you do it, the easier it will get most of the time. I know there's still going to be those curveballs that get thrown at me with type 1, but, with experience, you will learn how to deal with those things.
Tyler, I don't even have to talk. You obviously have been listening to the podcast. I could just let you go on by yourself. I completely agree with everything you're saying. I will tell you that last night, there was an unfortunate accident in my town last week where the superintendent of our schools, a man who lives locally and is just very well loved in the town, was struck while jogging, and he was killed. And last night, at a lacrosse game at our high school, his youngest son is on the lacrosse team. And so it was a big event here in town where, his son came back and people were coming in from other towns and the stadium was completely full. And at the last minute, Arden says, me and my friends, we want to go to the lacrosse game. So I had already had something planned. My wife was already working. We couldn't go with her, and I didn't want to say no. And so at the last minute, and something that I think people who parent kids with type 1 diabetes would find hard to believe that this could work in your life. But at the last minute, I wasn't home. I was at my son's baseball game when she texted me, can I go to the lacrosse game? I told her, no problem. Go ahead and get a shower. She just got back from practice. I get a shower, be ready when I get home, and I'll take you over there. And I drove her and a couple of friends to the school. I dropped them off. She had a juice box, 2 packs of fruit snacks, and, her phone where I can see her blood sugar. And believe it or not, we put an Apple Watch on her girlfriend who pays more attention to stuff like that than Arden does. So I said, hey, if Arden doesn't text me, it'll like kind of tap you on the wrist if she doesn't answer me after a while. I said, make her text me back if she did. I only spoke to her once, 2.5 hours later, when she said, hey, can you come get us now? Other than that, it was fine. She had a soft pretzel while she was there.
That's awesome.
Like that kind of stuff. It's not doable. You know, it just, like you said, it just takes practice and time, and then all of a sudden things that seem very, very impossible are not even an issue anymore, and on the fly. Like, I can't even tell you that didn't slow my life down at all. I didn't have to stop to make these decisions. I did them while I was doing other things. So
and back to the kids thing, and if my child does get type 1 diabetes, by the time that we have kids, the technology could be, okay, we put the artificial pancreas on them and we're good to go.
And that's the end of it. And listen, I can tell you as a person who has 2 kids and has been alive coming up on almost twice as long as you have been, maybe not quite, but close enough to make me feel really old when you told me you're only in your late 20s. Something's going to happen in life, man. You know what I mean? So if you sit still and wait for something that's going to go exactly right, you'll never do anything. So, no, go ahead and have your baby.
So, right now everything's going good. Yeah. I have pretty good control. I still have those moments where you're just like, I don't know what happened.
Oh, sure, yeah.
The other day I had a cheeseburger and I had French fries, and I bolused what I thought was the proper amount, but apparently that wasn't the proper amount, and I was at like 280. Okay. And that was like, oh my goodness, I don't know what I did. So, it wasn't like I knew the carb count, but I guess my body had started producing insulin, that week. And so I had lowered my normal insulin dose. My carb count, my insulin to carb ratio went up went down. I was at like a 1 to 15 at that time. And so I gave a 1 to 15 insulin to carb ratio for that burger and fries. Apparently I should have been giving a 1 to 10 insulin to carb ratio.
Yeah. Or who knows, the bun might have been a little harsher than you were used to. Listen, Arden obviously grew over the last couple of nights, and her blood sugar was getting higher at 3 o'clock in the morning. Then last night, out of nowhere, whatever was going on stopped. And I couldn't get her. I fought to keep her blood sugar above 65 all night last night. And then finally at like 7 in the morning, I got it to go up, and then it just went the other way, and I barely touched her with the carbs. You know what I mean? And then boom, now she's 170, and she's late for school because I wanted her blood sugar to come up before she left for school. And she says to me, well, hey, since I'm late, I'm going to get something to eat. And I had to get her out of the door, but I was like, why didn't you tell me that 15 minutes ago? I said, now we can't really pre-bolus. I can't wait. And I was like, well, I don't want you not to do it. And then, go ahead and take the food. I gave her the insulin. And now this whole day's been a mess because I can't find, every time I find level ground, it's time to eat again. You know, and it happens to everybody, man. Like, you can do as well as you. Arden's last A1C was 6, and still, you can do everything right, and still the life part of it can get in the way and mess up your decisions. And dude, you sound like you're doing great. You really do. We're coming up on an hour. I don't want to. I know you made time for this during the day, which I really appreciate. But it sounds like you're doing fantastic. I hope you check back in. I'd love to hear how it goes, in the future too.
Yeah, I definitely will. And I really appreciate everything that you're doing for the community. I say the community. I've been a part of it for 7 months now, but everything that I've heard from your podcast has been just great. And then, being part of a type 1 group in my area is a huge help. And just being around other people that have type 1 and learning from them. There's a few people in the group that are in their 60s and 70s and have had type 1 for 50 years and have no complications, and just it's amazing. And one of the ladies just got her pilot's license, and she has type 1 diabetes.
They must have a wealth of information for you right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, Tyler, I genuinely appreciate you coming on, and I now, at the very least, I got to hear back when you decide to have a baby or not, or adopt or whatever. I definitely would. Please keep in touch.
Absolutely, I will.
And good luck. I really want to wish you good luck.
All right. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks for coming on, man. As always, nothing you hear on the Juicebox podcast should be considered medical advice or advice of any kind at all. This is a podcast, not an advice thing. It's a podcast. Okay. Thank you so much to Omnipod for sponsoring the podcast, because we wouldn't be able to come and not give you advice about living with type 1 diabetes if it wasn't for the support of Omnipod. So everybody, yay! Check out myomnipod.com/demo, or the links in the show notes to find out more about the world's only tubeless insulin pump. Hey, how about Tyler, huh? How great was he? Maple Long John made me want a donut talking to him. All right, listen, I know this episode's a little late, but as I said earlier, Arden's team was busy over the last 10 days preparing for and playing in the New Jersey State Little League softball tournament. They are champions in 2016. They won the whole thing, and so we're very proud of her. And at the same time, that's why you didn't get a podcast. So blame her if you're upset. Also, if you go to my Arden's Day Facebook page or the Juicebox Podcast Facebook page, you can see a great picture of Arden getting a hit in that tournament. Find me on social media or on the Facebooks and etc. And by the way, I'm going to put out another episode really quick because I owe you. See you soon.